And for those of you that don't know, Professor Laurel Bongiorno. She is our very special guest today, and I want to thank everyone for coming to this last Meaningful Books of the academic year. We had 2 this year. So we have come actually to celebrate Laurel, not only her 2012 Lyman Professorship Award, but also her new position as Dean of Education and Human Studies beginning July 1st, 2013. So
thank you.
Today's Meaningful Books veers a little bit from the usual theme, which is simply what books have meant to someone over their lifetime and why, to the theme of favorite summer beach reads, which is totally in keeping with Laurel's expertise, which we know is play. And you will notice by all these wonderful stacks of books that Laurel's passion for reading comes in series. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome you, Laurel, and you're here to put us in the mood for summer beach reading and
yes.
Weather as well. So,
well, I brought just a few books of the many series books that I read, but I thought what I'm going to do is just sort of go through pile by pile and talk about sort of when I got hooked and how this all happened, and it's going to be random, but why don't I'll start with the most serious of the books, which are the most, I would say, the most serious writer of them all here, which is Chris Bajalian, and he is going to be the speaker at graduation, I think, this year, I heard. I don't know if that's a secret. I don't think so.
It's been advertised.
But I was very excited about that because I would say he is my favorite summer beach read author. And some things I like about his books are that they're all different. And that's unusual for a series reader to say. Usually series readers get all caught up in the characters all being the same, but every one of his books is different. I stood Water Witches up because I think of all of them, that's really my favorite. I liked Law of Similars. The Double Bind was really interesting. Have other people read his books? So The Double Bind, the main character's name is Laurel, and the tragedy that happens to her is in Underhill, which is where I live. And I went to hear him at Barnes & Noble when the book came out and raised my hand at the end and said, "I'm Laurel and I'm from Underhill. Where did you get the name and the location?" And he said, "Totally random." And he signed my book, "May only good things happen to you throughout your life." That was just really... But I have a cousin who is in Philadelphia, and she called me and left a message. "Oh my gosh, my book group is reading this book, and it can't be random that it's Laurel in Underhill. You have to find out." So that was why I went to hear him speak. I kind of like, he sort of turns out a book a year, so I'm always trying to pay attention. I realized when Paula and I were getting ready for this that I had missed a couple while I was writing my dissertation, so I made up for one of them. In March, I read The Night Strangers. Have any of you read that one? That's the one where he decided to be Stephen King. And it starts on with a plane crash, and I read it on a plane. My husband thinks I'm sick. I didn't actually do that. And when I was done, it took me like 2 days to read on the last vacation, and I handed it, I didn't hand it, I read it on my Nook. So I told my husband he should read it next, and he started it, and he went, "Yeah, just tell me how it ends." This is too Stephen King for me. But so Chris Bajalian tries on different things. It's very interesting. All right, where do I want to go next? Oh, the other thing I like about him is so many of his books are set in Vermont. So that's kind of cool that you know where they are and have been to the same places, and it's kind of interesting.
what was his first one, Laurel? Was it Water Witches?
Water Witches was definitely an early one. I don't know if it was his first. Let's peek.
Hi.
That was his first famous one.
Yeah.
Past the Bleachers, Hangman, A Killing in the Real World. Hardscrabble books, Water Witches. Yeah.
And Midwives was that?
Midwives was the one that got him on the radar because Oprah chose it as one of her books. That was when I started reading him. And I give a lot of books as gifts, and my sister gets one of his books after I read them and think she'll like them. So she's not getting the Stephen King-esque one. I think she'll like that. All right, so let's go somewhere else. So the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo series, I was doing my dissertation when these came out. And part of getting through your dissertation is knowing when to stop and take a break so that you can actually go back and write again. And my husband and I went to Rockport, Massachusetts, which is one of our favorite getaways, and we were there for 3 days. So day 1, day 2, day 3. I was just going to get them into them. And as I finished, I would hand them to him, and he was reading them just as fast.
You read one in a day?
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah. I loved them. I also try to keep up. You know, I think working with college students, and I often teach the children's literature course, and one of the things I try to do is stay up on things. So whenever there's a pop culture phenomenon, I have to make sure I read it. But I really, really liked these books. Have other people read them?
I have never read them.
Interesting. So they're today. The girl who is the main character is basically a good enough technology person to be a hacker. So they're solving a classic mystery with all the latest tools. So it's really kind of interesting, and I never felt ahead of anybody in these books. I was like, what are they doing? I haven't figured this out. And there are movies, so this is another thing I like to talk about, is the movies that go with books. The movies didn't capture the books for me. I watched the Swedish version of the movie, and I just stopped. I just didn't like it. And then I watched the American one, and I liked it. But one of the things that is really prevalent in these books is statistics about abuse against women in the country where they're set. And they didn't capture that, because the story, especially the very first one, has a lot to do with sex and women's roles and open marriage, and both movies missed it. So I thought that was kind of interesting. These books I like much better than the movies. I don't always say that.
Do you read the book before you watch the movie?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I never go to the movie first, if I can help it. Every once in a while there's a movie that I realize is a book, and then I'll go back and read the book. But, okay, so that leads me to Grisham. Who probably every one of these has turned into a movie or will turn into a movie. I have just liked his books. They really are beach reads. You know, they're fun, they're fast, they're interesting. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not seeing all the flaws in them. Lawyer in the room. I remember reading, I was reading The Client, which is one of the really, really lengthy ones, and I was on vacation, and I was third day into it, and we were going to the movie. So I had to finish it. So I had spent all day, and I got into the movie after probably 45 minutes after being done with the book, and I was so upset. They didn't cast the characters the way I wanted them. I hadn't stepped far enough away from it to enjoy the movie. And then I read an interview with Grisham, who, you know, one of the things, The Firm, is a book I absolutely love. The movie, they totally changed the ending. It's like, why would you change it? Grisham says, they pay me, they can do whatever they want to with my books. So I try to keep his books and his movies in my mind separate. I don't expect them to just be making the exact same movie. They always change things. He also steps out and does non-legal books, which I find really interesting. He's got baseball in a baseball book. He's got The Painted House. He's got a book set in Italy. So it's always interesting when he says, "Yeah, I'm not gonna. My next one's not gonna be a legal book." But I'm always, the day the next one comes out, I definitely buy it. Like, I'm definitely ahead of the game on his books, and usually digest it in 2 days. I just set the time aside to do it. So where to go next?
Well, let me ask, do you buy most of them, or do you go to the library?
If they're a series that I have a collection of, I buy them. And, well, let's go there next. I'm now a Nook user. So here's my Nook. And this is, I'm not good at coming up for air when I'm in books, and this makes it even like, oh, I'm done, buy the next one. Like, I don't even go get a cup of coffee or anything. I just start reading the next book. So Nooks are great for book addiction issues. And one of the series that I put on my list that we talk about would be this vampire series, Sookie Stackhouse. And they made the HBO True Blood series off of it. Well, my daughter recommended it to me. She's in her 20s. She said, "Mom, you're going to love these." And they're really brainless beach read, vampires and love stories, and it's crazy and addictive. And there are 13 of them. And in about 3 weeks, I was at book 12, and I finished it, and I went to order book 13. It comes out May 7th. I was so mad. So it comes out May 7th. So you'll know what I'm doing on May 7th. Yeah, it's coming soon. So so it's interesting. So I think I'm done collecting new books. I think they're going to be on my Nook. And we're in the process of getting our house ready to move. And so we've had to go through books and books and books and books and more books. And what we decided to do was all we kept were the collections. Everything else we have donated places. So
some of us are going to know very collaborative when you got your Nook with you.
What I'm really doing? It's May 7th. Reading Sookie Stackhouse. And it's the 13th and final book. Like, I thought I was actually getting to read a whole series just from start to finish, and then
is that important?
Book 13?
It sounds like it is, that you hate sort of being stilted in your reading, that you like to just go right through.
Yeah, I like to do it, and I don't like to be interrupted. And if there's a series that exists, Clive Cussler, every time a new one comes out, it's again. So let's talk Clive Cussler. So Clive Cussler, now has books. I've been reading them for 20 years, and now he writes with other people, and he's got different characters, and now his kids are helping him, and I'm still reading them, but sometimes I'm a little annoyed because I like the classic characters, and the Cussler novels are fun because my husband loves them too. So both of us read the same book within a week usually. We always have to check who's, if it's a birthday or something. Did you buy me that? Because I'm going to buy that. Checking with each other. But they are the ultimate. Has anybody read them? They are James Bond undersea. So he's an oceanographer who sort of works for the CIA of undersea problems.
What's his name? Doesn't he have like
Dirk Pitt.
Yeah, Dirk Pitt.
Yeah. Dirk Pitt. And Clive Cussler is also always writes himself into the books. So there's always a scene where he's talking to someone at the bar, or he's talking to the man by the very fancy car. And what was his name? Oh, his name was Clive Cussler. And you go, there it was. So he has his little shtick that you like in there. It's always an unbelievable terrorist something, or and they also, every chapter starts long ago. So there'll be a sunken ship, or there will be an earthquake or something, and it always sets the tone for the modern day problem that's going to happen. So, and he mixes reality and fiction very well. That's one of the things I like. Like in one of them, you find the real remains of Abraham Lincoln in a Sahara desert. You know, it's that kind of thing is going on. You know, really, that's what happened. So, you know, and there's one with the Incas, and you know, so there's always a terrible villain. There's always a happy ending. That he always saves the world, and I think it's fun that my husband and I both read them. So we're always bantering about what's happening in those books, and they just keep turning out. So let's see, Twilight. I'll go back to vampires for a while. So the Twilight series I read because my students were reading it, and I wanted to be able to banter with them, and then I actually really liked it. I'm ashamed to say. And I did try some of Stephanie Meyer's other books, and I didn't like. There's one called Host that actually is out in the movies right now, and I made it through about half of it, and it was taking me forever. And that's sort of a sign. If I don't like the book, it's been sitting for a while. If I like the book, I hibernate and read the book. So, but the Twilight series, it's just, it's interesting because teachers talk to me about it. You know, should 13-year-olds be reading this book? Shouldn't they? I tell them they really are PG-13 books. They're not, they're not an adult romance novel at all. So I tell them, really, I think it's fine. They did interesting things with the movies. I think there were 2 or 3 different directors, so the movies I saw them all, but I didn't, go gaga over them at all. But they're a series I'll probably keep reading. That's the other thing I do is I read books again and again. That's why I keep them. I'm thinking about reading Harry Potter again this summer. So that was a series I didn't bring, but even as an adult, I loved those books. But they were out when my daughter was in elementary school up through, so she's the same age as the characters, and so that was very exciting series reading. And we'd get our hands on a copy from England that nobody else had yet, and we would all read together instead of taking turns reading the book. We read one of them aloud, the 3 of us. So that was cool.
What makes you reread? Is it because you're reading so quickly that you want to go back and absorb them again? Or?
I think I forget them. I read so many books that I go, I don't really remember that one. I'm going to read that again. The Mitford series right here, I'm totally different. I sort of like these mysteries and save the world books and that kind of thing. But the Mitford series is about a minister and his congregation and his daily life. And he gets married for the first time in his 50s, and it's about getting through that. And then one of the books is actually the wedding and everybody getting ready for it. And just, relaxing, lovely story. And, they're not the best written books, and yet I love the characters in them. You feel like you get to know them. And my sister, I think, gave me... They all have potlucks at church all the time, and they all have their recipes that are their specialties, and they actually made a recipe book from the fictional characters. And my sister made me that. That didn't make the cut when we... Don't tell her. Just delightful stories. And I think it's a little bit about aging, which I like too. There's a lot of... characters who've lived in the same place for a long time, and yet things are changing. So, delightful characters if you're that kind of reader. And again, there's a whole bunch of them. There's more than those, but that's what I grabbed from home. It's interesting, I know a lot of people who read these. And I was surprised at that. I thought, I don't even know where I found them. But a lot of people I know have read them and really like them.
Would you say this isn't politically correct, but they're definitely chick books? or do you know guys that read them?
Oh no, my husband has read all of them.
Really?
There's a lot of, it's a big mix of characters. Uncle Billy is a great character, and Father Tim is the main character. There's a men's group that eats at the diner, and now they really can't. Like, one of them has diabetes, and so they've moved to eating healthy food at a different restaurant, and they're coping with the fact that they're eating healthy food. I mean, it's very fun, you know. I would say it's not a series that I've seen anybody else sort of grapple with the material before. So he has his own parish to begin with, and then he retires, and he goes to other parishes, so you get to meet new characters, and he's working with this family that were really living in poverty, and ends up adopting one of the children, and throughout the books they're trying to find his siblings, so there's that underlying story going on. So it's a good series. I don't want to tell you more because I think you should. I think everybody in that room might enjoy it.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to tell you anything because some really good things happen in it. So there's one book standing alone here that's not a series, and that was Eat, Pray, Love. And I missed, that's one I missed when I was doing my dissertation. And I purchased it. I was like, I can't do this, I can't do this. And finally, I took a weekend off and read it. And it was like, it was interesting that it was a phenomenon kind of book. And who's read it?
I saw the movie.
Yeah.
I've read bits of it.
The movie was fine. I didn't think it captured the book.
Yeah, it was obvious.
I would read more of this author. The book was interesting in that it was in 3 parts, 3 different locations. Her head was in 3 different places. I really liked, the first part is in Italy, and she eats her way through Italy, and you know the way she described the food, I just wanted to go to Italy. And then she went and did a yoga thing for a whole section of the book, and I do yoga, so I really thought that was really interesting. And then she goes to, where's the 3rd place she went? Bali? I think that's where it was. So she, that part wasn't as good for me in the book, and I was like, that's sort of fine. That's where she finds herself. But I felt like I wanted to put it there because it really was a beach read that I had put off, and then finally got to sit and enjoy and go, oh, I can see why people really like this. And I remember reading portions of it a lot. So I was at the hairdresser with a book in my purse, and I just read while I'm there, and I'm reading aloud to my hairdresser from the Italian portion. When I'm in a book, boy.
Everyone is.
Everyone's in the book with me, yeah. Or I'm totally ignoring everyone because I'm in the book. And that's just how it is with the beach reads. So I think what's left is the Da Vinci Code. So the Dan Brown books. I had actually read The Digital Fortress before the Da Vinci Code became this big thing. And I was like, I've read this guy before. And so I read the Da Vinci Code. I really liked it. Thought it was really interesting. It was fascinating to sort of watch the hubbub about it. I was staring at the TV going, it's fiction. Why are you on the Today Show? It's a novel. It's an interesting novel. And then I read The Digital Fortress again, and then Angels and Demons. And Angels and Demons, I just watched the movie again. I didn't think it was as good as the Da Vinci Code. It got a little too violent. Like, every chapter was violent. Whereas the Da Vinci Code had more about the clues and the coding and that kind of stuff. I liked that one better. But again, perfect beach reads. I've read them all 3 times. So that'll happen again, I'm sure. So, what do you guys read for beach reads? Or series books?
I have a problem with the Da Vinci Code.
Yeah.
It's a great book until the last chapter.
satisfying ending.
Unsatisfying is
Yes.
the chapters before. I also liked, was it your friend Clive, who you mentioned that the chapters go back in history.
Mm-hmm.
That's a Michener thing, isn't it? That anybody go back as far as James Michener? I mean, all his books start in prehistoric times.
That is true.
And-
That's
and come
interesting.
forward.
And do they come forward
To wherever his modern.
in a chapter,
Well,
or does it take time?
it-
I'm just curious. My mother
it's
read
the book.
Michener.
It's
That was
not
like
every
her
chapter.
favorite.
It's the book that does
Yeah.
that.
Because this one, he just does one chapter, and then you're in the present.
Is it this? What I found with Michener, and maybe it's the same with Clive, that I would be reading Centennial, and I'd be reading about the fur trappers, and I'd get really into that, and then the chapter would end, and the next chapter would be about Pennsylvania Dutch with the scrapple and things, and I'd start that. Now this isn't.
Yeah,
We
what
should
just
look more fur
happened?
traders, but I get 2 pages into the next chapter, and it was.
That's interesting. So I would not put Cussler and Michener anywhere near the same genre. Michener is much more factual, and historic research has gone on, and Cussler may yell at me because of that, but really it's more like a James Bondy thing with a little touch of reality
Did you ever
through this
do-
research.
Did you? I was at one time the night clerk at Redstone campus, and a friend of mine had all of the James Bond. I was working midnight until 6 in the morning, and I think it took me about a week to read all 14.
Really? No.
That's probably, except for Barbara Tuchman, that's probably the one series
Yep.
of an author that I completed, and that's beach reading too. But then again, the movies have taken precedent over the novel.
Right, yeah. Yeah. So you made me think about one of the things that I really like about Chris Bajalian. A lot of his books, every chapter is told by a different character's perspective as you move through the story, and I love that. And I find it very interesting. I'm always thinking about how are we going to wrap this up? Like, where are their stories going to come together? And he does that in a few of them. Transistor Radio is like that.
The first things I do in the Sunday Free Press, into this column.
Yeah.
The Slap, have you read that? That's like that. It takes the incident of someone slapping a child at a barbecue, and it's told through the different perspectives of everyone at the barbecue.
Interesting.
It's not a great book, I
No.
think, but it just
But it
reminds
does that same
me. Yeah.
perspective taking.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's an interesting way to write.
I don't read too many of the series, really. The #1 Ladies Detective Agency, I absolutely adored. I don't know if anyone's read that, but it was set in Africa, and I think that's part of why I loved it. It was in Botswana, but it was quiet. They were such quiet stories, really quiet, as I imagine Africa. I don't know, maybe that's a romantic view, but
Yeah.
quiet and hot. I loved them. And then the cat who, I had to read those because there were 2 Siamese cats, and their guy, their detective
Yeah.
cat who.
It's funny. You just made me make a connection I hadn't made before. As a child, I know I'm a series reader. Nancy Drew.
Oh gosh.
I was brought into this addiction by my parents, I think, because I had all the Nancy Drews, and I read them from #1 on, and I don't know what my parents did with my collection. And I've started to collect some of them. I've been getting them at flea markets and finding some first edition, ones, that that they're selling for $3.
We've come full circle of Chuck with all the Hardy Boys series.
Yeah. And I had a lot of the Hardy Boys and read those when I got done with Nancy Drew. I started them. But I never thought about that. Then as a child, I really liked series. Yeah.
Do you ever read a series and think, 2 books ago that should have wrapped up?
Yes. Yeah, they're pushing it. Yeah, absolutely.
What are some of your favorite, other than Harry Potter, children's? Do you have any favorite children's series?
Yeah, the Magic Treehouse, the Babysitter's Club.
All those guys.
There are some books they're called called? The Sideways School. And he wrote,
I think I remember that.
yeah, they're great. He wrote, I think it was a few of those. But, and I'll read authors. So, you know, I even like with picture books, I have all the Eric Carle books. I have all the I Spy books.
Yeah.
Do you have anything lined up for the summer?
It's gonna be a theme.
I
was
don't.
gonna
I
say,
know.
do you have time to read any more series that never?
Selling a house, building a condo.
Yeah,
Yes, I will. I have, May 7th, Sookie Stackhouse will be on the list.
So for May 7th and May 9th.
And I think there's a Grisham book coming out in May. I think that I got a notice about that from my little Barnes and Noble, email. I swear, I mean, the computers know what you read. It's really weird. You get the, hey, your favorite book, you're reading this series, the next one's coming.
I wanted to ask you how you discover new books or new authors or new series. Is that, like, do you take recommendations from, I don't know, like Goodreads or something like that?
I do, and I would say that I definitely am on Barnes & Noble probably daily. I definitely talk about books with friends. I think we're all readers. I have a friend that every time we see each other, we trade. I give her 3 and she gives me 3. Yeah, that we have to read. And I do pay attention to the authors that I love, so that I'm a pretty easy person to buy for. Either give me a Barnes & Noble gift certificate, or if one of my favorites has a new book out, it's a safe bet.
Are you doing any book clubs?
I'm not.
Yeah.
I think you'd find a book club too slow.
It's possible. Right.
Whatever everyone else chooses, as opposed to like.
Just give me that.
Well, and that's-
on your list.
Yeah, well, and it is funny. My chiropractor is in a book club, so she tells me about the books they're reading, and we talk about the books during my chiropractor appointments. But yeah, I think that book clubs often pick books that are just too heady. Like I have to say, I think as an educator, I think we help kids not love books by dissecting them and asking questions about them and making them write about them. And sometimes you just want to go, oh, that was so good, and be done. And for me, grab the next one and start reading. So, I try to sort of have that balance of what do I want to talk about and what don't I want to talk about. I was sad that my husband didn't read the Stephen King-esque Chris Bajalian book, because I really need somebody to read that so I can talk to them about it. Because there was, there's a plane crash, and there's some ghost stuff, and there are herbalists that lean toward being a coven of herbalists. And that book, there's a lot to talk about. And it's funny, in Chris Bajalian's books, there is a book group guide in the back of each of them. So I usually talk to myself. I'll read it. Answer the questions. Try and find, what do I think about this? And sometimes I'll just go, it wasn't that deep. You were just trying to be Stephen King, And he pulled it off to the creepy, how Stephen King has. So Stephen King I could have also brought a pile of, and I like his, he has different genres. I like his bizarre, quirky genres, like Misery is one of my favorites. What is it, Doris Claiborne? Yeah. I like the offbeat ones rather than the, creepy, a virus is coming ones. And I had a friend once who took a course in Stephen King at UVM, and we talked books the whole time. He got the credit for it, but I was right there along with him.
You mentioned before how you like to read books that your students are talking about.
Yeah.
Do you then use books in your teaching, or is it really just a way for you to connect with your students
Both.
on a more personal level?
Both.
Can you maybe talk about how you use it in teaching?
Well, children's literature course.
Right.
I often talk to them about their own reading habits and modeling reading and, what kind of, helping them sort of self-discover what do they really like to read, because sometimes they'll come and go, I'm not a reader. And I'm like, well, let's investigate that. What do you read? Comic books, that is reading. Finding out what it is they like. And I often have them talk about, a most meaningful book in their life and a favorite book and a favorite beach read. And that's another place where we really trade book recommendations. But we had a lot of fun the year that Twilight came out, because we were all sort of reading at the same time. I bought stickers and decals and stuff. And we had a lot of fun. So we definitely share passions for different kinds of books.
You do any nonfiction?
All day, every day, unfortunately.
Well,
I would say I don't. I don't read nonfiction for fun, but I read nonfiction all the time to keep up. So, I could have just as well brought 3 boxes of books from the education world. And again, they would have looked like this. All of David Elkind's books and all of Vivian Paley's books. And
you're not reading a Bill Bryson book.
no. So
Are these not part of your exhibit?
they're not.
That's totally coincident.
Oh, which? Oh, these?
Yeah.
No, no, they're just here. I should bring them downstairs. It's a library book.
Yeah, did see that one just sitting in here.
Yeah.
The other one that seems.
Teaching assistant versus activity.
Yeah.
So it's reading you completely escapism.
Yeah. It's a great way to, yes. The beach and an escape. And, I might come up for lunch. I might not.
But now with the Nook, you're really just exclusively, not almost exclusively.
Unless I'm building my collection,
Yeah.
I'm buying it on the Nook. Absolutely. And I did not know if I would make that transition. I made that transition beautifully. And that goes in my purse way easier than one of these. So I usually have my Nook on me. And it's interesting, I've started downloading magazines on it too. It's not quite as good. And I don't have the Nook that has the backlighting. It's not like reading a computer screen. And I bought the Nook as a dissertation prize. When I got done, then I got my Nook. And I got to start reading the fun stuff again. Yeah.
And does it change your reading habits? I mean, obviously, aside from the fact that you finish one book and you just go ahead.
Go ahead. That's the biggest habit, is I don't have to go to a store. I just
Or a
buy the
library.
next one.
A
Yeah.
public library.
I still go to the library. I live near Deborah Rawson Library, and it's just the nicest place to curl up and read. So I still haven't given up going to the library.
Where is that now?
It's in Underhill Flats.
Is it
It's right near.
by the school?
Yeah.
So it's not the tactile. I mean, you don't miss like this and the sound of the pages.
I don't know. I thought I might.
Yeah.
But look what I did. I bought one of the covers that's like a book. So this is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I do this to turn the page.
Yeah.
So, I'm sort of, there's some of them, you can read like this, and that's not how I still have my little book. That's what it feels like to me.
I've read lots of magazine and newspaper articles about how e-readers have given people the courage. Well, it's not courage, it's actually they're hiding away what they're reading. And they can
Oh, that's
feel
so funny.
completely at ease about reading 50 Shades of Grey on the train.
That's
because
so,
nobody's judging them.
nobody's.
Or have we moved to a scenario where everybody that has an e-reader is suspected of reading 50 Shades of Grey on the train?
So funny.
Wow.
I expected somebody to ask me because it was last year's hot read. The answer is yes, and I read all 3. Because I had to. I can't just read the first. The first one was what's going on, and the rest was, there are 3 of them. Must finish.
Well, and with other authors, you were
I haven't, and I would say that's on my summer. That's on my
Oh,
summer
okay.
list. And I had one friend who absolutely hated it,
Oh, really?
and the critics really liked it. So I'll make my own decision. But
We
that
just
is-
got that one
We
too.
did, yeah.
Did you?
Downstairs
Yeah.
in our new books.
And one of our staffers in the library started it, and she said no.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Who was that?
I can't say.
Oh, okay.
That's confidential.
Yeah.
How do I know? I just saw her reading it.
It's okay. And it's back on the new books.
Yeah, I will definitely try other stuff. Like Grisham's other stuff, I really, really, really like.
Me too.
How easy is it for you to kind of go, and how quickly does it happen for you to kind of go, no, this is not for me, I'm going to leave it?
2 chapters.
Really?
I'm either hooked or I'm not.
And you've no problems about just going, not for me,
Not
move
for
on.
me.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, I also think I have enough friends who I share books with that I trust. You know, I say, well, I like that, and they'll go, no. No. Or they'll come with the book and say, you got to read this. You're going to love this.
Are there any really popular either series or even just individual titles that you thought, right, I'm going to read it, either because my students are reading it or whatever it might be, and you just really couldn't take to?
I'm not a big historical fiction fan. So, Island of the Blue Dolphins,
I love.
can't stand it.
Oh,
Had to teach that book with a smile on my face. We've talked about that
Yeah, you said
before.
you're not like animal. Like I love
Yeah,
animal
right.
stories, but you
Yeah.
relationships.
I definitely have things that I just have to, you know, I read and go, really, this is a classic. And it's funny, Bajalin, I've read all of his stuff, but he has one that's historical fiction, and I skipped it. I didn't even read a chapter. I just went, oh, no, I'm not going to read that one. I might have liked it. Maybe I should go back and try it, because I like his other stuff, but just not my thing. And I have no idea why that is. I have absolutely no idea. It's just not.
Do you think that you can take a kid in college who has no reading habits and make them a reader at that age?
I do.
Or if it has to start from.
I think that there's got to be something out there for them, and it's helping them find what it is, and to not feel embarrassed by it. That, you know, I mean, reading comics books is reading comic books, you know, or reading. I just think about like reading Nancy Drew. You know, we sort of giggle about that, and yet, you know, they're good young reader stories, and fantasy books, and you know, you may have had in high school what they really liked was mysteries, and they were reading The Hobbit, you know, mismatch, and then if you can show them. I also think the readers are kind of good because you can make the print as big as you want. You're only looking at one thing. You know, I think some kids don't read because they're not good at reading, and there might be reasons for that. So the reader, it's interesting because I was just having a conversation about the reader for the elderly population who are starting not to see so well, and that you can make the font so big. My father had macular degeneration, and this would have been fabulous for him.
I wonder about Harry Potter. What did she do that captured the imagination of everybody? And has there been anything like that since? I mean, I know that the vampire books, Twilight, was sort of a big deal.
Sort of, yeah.
Harry Potter
There's a
is
different
just
kind.
like
It's a different
bizarre.
age group, though.
Yeah, I just
Yeah.
don't know what it was.
I'll joke and say it was something magical.
Yeah.
Because it really was. You know, she gave kids that were in the age group of being in elementary school, like my daughter, when that came out, are readers. They're not afraid of 700 pages. They're not afraid of 500 pages. You know, they just, that's cool, you know? They're like, oh, it's too short. If it's shorter than that, they want more. I think she made her characters so interesting. And, you know, I think about her for me as such an avid reader. I can't tell you another book that I have a favorite chapter in, or a book series that I have a favorite chapter in. I can tell you the chapter in the first book called Diagon Alley, that is my favorite chapter in that book. And I've probably read that chapter aloud to 13 different